Well, controversy has followed the federal government's decision to prohibit students under the age of 18 from taking part in the National Examinations Council and West African Examinations Council exams. Education Minister Tahir Mamman has insisted that WAEC, which oversees the Senior School Certificate Examination, will enforce the 18-year age requirement for candidates wishing to take these exams, while the Nigeria Union of Teachers has condemned the decision, calling it unrealistic, or they say exceptional students who might be younger but academically advanced are not considered in the policy. Well, the national president of the Academic Staff Union of Universities has personally backed the policy, saying that children should follow the standard academic progression in Nigeria, which is 6 years each in primary and secondary schools before moving on to university at the age of 18.
We're joined now by the former president of the Association of Private Schools Proprietors, Dr. Bukola Dosunmu, at our overflow studio pretty much later. Lawyer and advisor, analyst Pass-Tietie will be joining us. Now, let's start off with Dr. Dosunmu. Good to see you, and thanks for your time.
Thank you very much.
This is causing some ripples across the country for many. They think that this is targeted at some first region in the country, and secondly, also pushing down the geniuses amongst the very young. Let us in on your thinking behind this policy which the government is pushing at the moment.
Thank you very much. It's a great privilege to be here. First, we need to be very sincere with ourselves. What we have here is a national policy, a policy on entry age for schools at different levels and requirements for it to be followed. Now, we need to be true to ourselves in Nigeria, and that's where this issue comes in, because if we mirror this policy and the issues we're generating around with the pronouncement in the light of the global practices, then we know that we're not being true and sincere to ourselves. So it's the policy for the country of the age that children need to come in. It's a policy that is going to help us to handle the hurry child syndrome. It's a policy that's going to be a panacea for a lot of issues if we have time to discuss it. We have problems with class keeping. We have the problem of examination malpractice. You are aware of the miracle and special centers. If you do an undercover report and go to those centers, you will see the age of those children. You will see there are children that have skipped SS3 classes from SS1 or SS2 that are going there. It's going to also strengthen the poor examination standards we have in some of our public schools. I'm sorry to say, but we know that we'll rather opt for the national examinations for some than take the state's ERC examination. It's also going to help and relieve the burden of rote learning on teachers, because most of the children in our classrooms are underaged. I am not saying most.
Not some.
Some of the children, honestly.
Okay,
you need
some,
to go.
not most.
Yeah, let me
just to be clear on
let me
that.
just take the word some.
Right.
But you will be shocked at what you will see in our schools. We have schools that close, that graduate children from primary 4. We have schools that take children in at 3.5, 4.5 years into primary 1 classes. We have schools that skip from GS2. They make some children write some public exam. All these things are clear to the regulators.
Isn't that a failure of the regulator?
Now you're hitting it.
Isn't there a regulator to ensure that these sharp practices or malpractices don't happen? And some of the problems you've just listed, are they really a function of age? Is it age that's contributing to this, really? Because some are saying, look, why don't you focus on infrastructure, teachers' welfare, making sure that the quality education is provided, and not majoring on what some refer to as minors.
I'm very glad about what you said about the failure of the regulatory system, because these standards were what used to obtain in the past. Do you remember those times of HSC?
School.
Yes, lower 6, upper 6,
A-levels,
SBS, A-levels. Let's trace our steps back, and you will know that this comes a long way. But failure of the regulatory system, and then a lot of issues from the private education sector, which you can't really blame. If there are no rules, people will certainly break it. My concern with this policy is, how do we deal with the backlog that we're going to have? because their lack of looking at the realities of the issue on ground has led to a dearth of 14-year-olds, 15-year-olds, and even parents need to actually wake up on these issues. So it's very important. You see, if we pay attention to what it is to have children develop properly, proper child development, you will know that we're doing ills to the Nigerian child.
But is there any empirical evidence, really, to show that if you're not up to the age of 18, by the time you get into university or higher education, it has a knock-on, negative knock-on effect?
Well, I'm not coming from the reference from the background of research,
right,
but I can prove to you that there are 3 key domains of learning. We have the cognitive, we have the affective, and we have the psychomotor. Most of the time when we say the children are smart, they're ready to move on, we focus on only one domain of learning, which is the cognitive. And then when you even look at the way we practice cognitive learning in Nigeria, we don't take our children all across the ladders of learning. We have 6 levels of learning. We have the remembering, understanding, applying, analyzing, evaluating, and creating. When you go into a typical Nigerian classroom, what do you see? Our children just memorize and cram. They can cram a textbook and go and write an examination. So you see, it's not about just infrastructure, and it's not also about data. When you look at the problems we're having in the university, these underage children, the vices, the moral issues we have to deal with, the issues with drugs that we have to deal with, you will consider that it's important that we begin to look out how we do education in Nigeria. I don't know if you've taken your time since all these matters started to take a look at the practices in different countries of the world. In UK, take a look at, and that's where most Nigerians are going to.
That's where I have an issue. If you talk about looking at other countries, we aren't looking at other countries to develop other sectors of our national life. It is when it suits us, we'll point at other countries. Otherwise, when we dig in deep, I think we'll find fault in all of this. Shouldn't we be thinking of having a Nigerian system? I recall it as Julius Nyerere who came up with education for self-reliant, the Ujama philosophy. Shouldn't we also, instead of talking about us modeling our education style with those in Europe, create our own system, just the same way we started, education that works for us? Shouldn't that be something that we should be looking at instead of aping the West all the time?
Can we just look at the way this age is spread? A child comes into primary 1 at 5 years, completes primary 1 to primary 6 at 11 years, plus the child goes to GS1, and then stays 6 years, and then that child will clock 17 in that SS3 age, in that SS3 class. So the issue here, which I wish government educated everybody on, sensitized awareness, and brought in the relevant stakeholders to be inclusive in all areas, is I think they're not educating us enough. If our children go into primary 1 at 5, if our children don't skip primary 6, if our children don't skip GS2, if our children don't leave from SS2 to go to miracle centers, they will be 17 plus on their way to university. And it solves this. So the problem is this entry age. And this is where the regulation comes in. Right. And it is this regulation that is our problem. That's where it is.
There you go. Let's bring in Frank Tietie, lawyer and a rise analyst. Frank, let's get your views on this. Well, some are asking, what exactly is the rush? Do you think there's any advantage to ensuring that a child does not enter university or gain admission until they're 18? What difference really would it make?
It doesn't make any difference. There is no advantage. We talk as if we are suffering from one form of selective amnesia. People will always say things to support whatever they think. It's their opinion. When has it become a problem that a Nigerian child is qualified to enter university so long as it's below 18? That is not the problem. Do you know what the problem is? The problem is that we have 18.3 million Nigerian children that are out of school. We don't have a minister who is filled with gusto, who is carrying out spirited moves in the media to finding solution to that. His problem, his headache, is that the Nigerian child is too brilliant, and so he has to be stifled. He has to be held down. because he has to attain a certain age before he goes to university. And then I'm happy that the respectable madam over there says she's not speaking from the standpoint of research. She doesn't have any data about whether there are miracle centers. She doesn't have data about exceptionally gifted Nigerian students that they want to deprive of their right to growth. You think the idea that a child is able to pass exams because when he's 14, the exams that adults could not pass, but he passed out at 14, you think because he did exam malpractice? No, it's as a result of discipline that many adults don't have. You think that age is a matter, you think that it determines maturity? People put in a whole lot of parents that we know put in a whole lot to discipline their children, whereas others don't. And then the ones who learn, who are able to express themselves, we in Africa, it's our joy to hold them down as if we hate our children. We keep on having stories, at least make recommendations that, it is proper for the children to go to school when they attain 18, but don't come and make it compulsory. Don't come and impose it. Initially, they said it was a matter of law. I asked, which law? So you have to turn the JAMB Act upside down to be able to find out that the minister can give directives. So we have agreed it's a directive. So, Honorable Minister, what is your problem? What do you have against Nigerian students or children if they are brilliant enough? Madam, again, I ask you in more pointed terms, which miracle centers produce children? Miracle centers are for people who have failed, mainly adults. We are dealing with a situation where our girls don't go to school, but they can be married off on underage, and our boys are more interested in business, incubation, and they don't go to school. We're dealing with real issues, and then you are telling me that Nigerian children should be held down. You keep mentioning other countries that they have a minimum. Look, if you mention countries, please say it in wholesome terms. The point is that it is recommended that a child goes to school at a certain age, but if there are exceptions to it, and it is with the children pass exams in very exceptional terms. Don't forget that we are in this country, and the legal minimum for entry into university in this country for a very long time has been 16 years. It was changed when the federal government adopted the 6334 system, and the idea was to de-emphasize the white-collar jobs so that persons who graduate from JS3 can go and do vocational work, not necessarily because there was anything wrong for a 16-year-old to get into school. Why do we deceive ourselves? And we always do these things in a politically correct manner. We have something else in our mind, but we come and say, it is a matter of law. It's no longer a matter of law. It's a matter of preference that we are against our children. Please, I will recommend very strongly to the Honorable Minister to listen to the highly respected Afe Babalawa SAN in his article in the Tribune, where with a lot of wisdom, advising the federal government not to go too far. Look at ASU. ASU is now cherry-picking and being politically correct. One way they will say, we need university autonomy. We should determine the fate of how our university, the standards of how our university should operate. So before that, it is the Senate of the universities that make recommendation as to the legal minimum age of entrance. Today, it is now a federal matter. I see the federal government does not have enough issues to bother. You wonder why we talk about issues of true federalism? So we are now going to take away the right of university senate to determine whether the age of a child to enter university, even when he's exceptionally brilliant. We have data, statistics of young children who enter the university at 14, turn out at 20, they are graduates. They are medical doctors, some of them are professors. But in Africa, and particularly Nigeria, that leads the way back on a backward reverse terms, is to keep those children there until they are recruited to become child soldiers. Look, my critics tell me that I get emotional about these issues, but because I can't understand why a president, a minister will sit down, leave 18 million children that are not in school, and then now begin to bother himself why children who are qualified to go to school should not go, but they should go and play, they should go and be watching video games and doing all sorts of things. What a country, for goodness sake. But look, we should tell ourselves the truth and not say in semantic manner and then come and justify one sort of things that's against our children. That's wrong.
All right, Frank. Thanks, Frank, for your insights. Let's bring in Dr. Dosunmu. Dr. Dosunmu, you're also an administrator. Is there an established, medical or psychological, point to this that tells us that bringing them, or let's use the phrase, catching them young, can ultimately be causing some kind of adverse effect in their development.
Yes, it's proven. And you see, it's unfortunate. I'm sorry, the lawyer, the barrister here, is actually mixing up issues. We're talking here about appropriate child development. We deny the children in Nigeria, we rob them of their childhood. You will see a 5-year-old already in primary 2, primary 3, and you need to see the rigor of cognitive work that they need to cram and they need to go through. And these children don't even have the stamina to endure it. Have you ever wondered that when our children, the longest period children will have in classrooms during their SS3 GS, it's probably 40 minutes or 1 hour period. And then they transit to university and then look at the extended hours that they need to sit in class. Maturity is very key. I disagree with you, sir.
What's the definition of maturity, really?
Well,
does it really have to do with age? I wasn't 16 as of October 1 when I finished secondary school. And I gained admission to university.
So you cheated?
No, I didn't cheat.
Yes, you
No,
did.
that's what Dr. Dosunmu is saying.
I do recall
that you cheated the system.
a parent actually stopped their daughter, I remember her name now, I just skipped my mind, from going to university. First class student. Very brilliant. But she had to stay home for 1 year before going to university. Does it really make sense?
You see, we're not denying that we have exceptionally gifted and talented children.
Right.
But how do we assess? How do you say this child is exceptionally gifted and talented?
Is that is that part of what the policy will
this
be?
Is part of what this is part of what we are advising the government to do. That in as much as you're trying to restrict and ensure that we do things properly, we should not ignore children that are exceptionally gifted and talented.
That's a good place to live it.
And we need to have a balanced assessment for their IQ, a balanced assessment of their strengths, and also have special programs for them. Children that are gifted and you just focus on their cognitive learning alone all the time, you're going to ignore all the parts.
We'll have to leave it there. Dr. Bukola Dosunmu,
and all that.
Thank you very much. You've made a good case. So also Pass-Tietie. It's almost like a metaphor for the Nigerian experience. You stop the country from going forward because of a few issues. We'll have to leave it there. Dr. Bukola Dosunmu, former president, Association of Private Schools Proprietors, and Pass-Tietie, lawyer and a rise analyst. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you.